Hello, hello, hello. This is David D. Hilster. Here I am every Saturday now. I've been doing this for a bunch of Saturdays. If you've been expecting Franklin Hugh, he's been doing that for a couple of years. I'm sitting in for him. He had to have some time off, folks. But I'm David D. Hilster. I'm from the Dissident Science Channel. I'm also one of the directors of the John Chappell Natural Philosophy Society. And today we're going to be having a great show. You don't want to go away. In my opinion, one of the great scientists of our time, of all times, in my opinion. So stay tuned. Yeah, that's me. That's me. And I want to thank all my subscribers. Hey, keep going up there. Going to get to 3,500 here soon. I appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying the new format here with our interviews with some of the great scientists. In fact, I've interviewed him before, but it's been a long time, and there's a lot of new people out there. And if you don't know Dr. Glenn Borchardt's work, you're missing something huge in science today. Where he influences a lot of us who are doing really amazing work out there. So you don't want to miss that. And of course, this is also broadcasting live to the John Chappell Natural Philosophy Society, started in the early 1990s as the NPA, Natural Philosophy Alliance. And in 2015, we changed our name. And we have cataloged almost 3,000 dissidents around the world in our database. And we have active members, over 300 active members. So anyways, let me get in with the introduction and tell you what this is all about, of course. And this is our Saturday Science Chats, and it is sponsored by the Natural Philosophy Society and also Dissident Science YouTube channel. And again, we're broadcasting live to both of those channels right now. And I can see, again, people are already joining. Thank you so much. And let's keep going here. The mission of the CNPS is to be an organization that above all promotes critical thinking without malice, to be an organization that supports, publishes, and promotes serious scientific work outside the mainstream, to provide a forum for open debate about modern topics in physics, cosmology, philosophy, that's today, it's really important, people, and mathematics, to provide a forum for presenting serious papers and theories without fear of censorship, and really important, to be run and controlled in its entirety by paid membership, including the election and directors by its members. That it is member organization. And if you want to go, we have our new website. People are signing up. It's brand new. A lot of our scientists are retired because they can critically think any way they want without having to worry about putting a meal on the table. But anyways, we've got our brand new website. You got to check it out. It's got a new whole look to it. It's got more of a feed of information about discussions going on in all areas and topics. And we have group and discussions, and we have forums for all these areas. You can sign up, and we have always great discussions going on there all the time. Works good on your phone, works good on your computer, but I encourage you to sign up. It is not anonymous. What we do require on our website is that you use your real name with your real picture, because this is a place where real scientists with real ideas meet. So we don't allow people to come in and some weird avatar and not know who the heck they are. So you do have to follow that one rule, but we invite everybody. And of course, how can you participate? You can sign up at naturalphilosophy.org. You can just sign up there. You want to consider becoming a member. Memberships are annual. We have all the memberships listed from $35 a year on up. And we have people who are retired and they're on a fixed income, but every little bit helps. If you can spare $35, if everybody pays a little bit, we'll be able to offset our expenses. The StreamYard, which we're using live to YouTube and Facebook, costs us so much a year. We have our website, and it's being hosted. That costs so much a year. We have software that we use now that's licensed. That costs so much a year. It comes up to a couple $1,000s. So greatly appreciated that everybody, including the people who are always here. If you're always here and you're using this, please consider helping out. It's greatly appreciated. and to defer the expenses. All this is volunteers. I get paid nothing for this. Well, I do get paid. I get paid in the ability to talk to some of the greatest minds on the planet, like Glenn Borchardt, who tolerates me. I'm just kidding. Uh, I really, that's what I get out of it, being around amazing and amazing people, including the members themselves. I mean, you can't get this anywhere, folks, and let people know. So you can participate in our community discussions on our website. You can also post news and happenings on social media. Folks, if you're someone from the old guard, those people out there who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s, because we have them all. My father is watching today. He's in his 80s. Social media is where it's happening, folks. That's where you gain people. That's where we are gaining new people all the time to our organization. That was one of the things the older members were saying. We're not getting new people. We are, and they're coming from social media. So get over it. That's where it's happening. That's where it's at. And please post. If you even have a Facebook page, whatever, post. Let people know about us. Our websites, for those people who are new, you can go to our community, naturalphilosophy.org. It's a wonderful, it's based on Buddy Boss. We license that software. It's really great, super easy to use, very modern, and you can get in some amazing discussions. I get in there and I argue away all the time. We have an online magazine. So if you're new to the area of dissident science or critical thinkers, we have an online magazine for critical thinkers. And it's at sciencewoke.org. Check it out. We have over 50,000 views already, and really great articles, easy to read. I know Glenn Borchardt has some stuff on there. You can read about him and his work. We also have a Wikipedia, and it is you can go to that at wiki.naturalphilosophy.org. And that Wikipedia is based on the same software, MediaWiki, that Wikipedia itself is based on, and that's on our server. And we have over 10,000 pages. In fact, you can again read about Glenn Borchardt there. He has a really nice biography. And if you have a biography on there and you don't like it, well, guess what? You can help out. That's a closed wiki. That means you can't go in and anybody can get in. You can imagine a Wikipedia full of people criticizing the Big Bang, relativity, and all that. If this was Wikipedia, it would be drummed out, just like drummed out, because Wikipedia, by definition, is the consensus. So obviously, by definition, it's not going to want to accept alternative views, and we do. And the reason we close it is because that's how we protect ourselves from people coming in and saying, no, you can't say the Big Bang is wrong, for instance. Also coming, the Chappell University courses in natural philosophy. Now, I'd love Glenn to do this. We've already got a couple people lined up. James Maxwell's in there. We got also my dad is writing one on the particle model, which stands on the shoulders of Glenn Borchardt, and he didn't even know it. And I told him, well, I'll tell you, I'll talk with Glenn about that story. But my dad just naturally got into and understood Glenn Borchardt's infinity. So I always start out with some commentary. I like to do that to let people know. Again, this is I'm again welcoming. I'm opening this up and welcoming my Dissident Science YouTube subscribers. I really appreciate it. Thanks for subscribing if you're new. I think you're going to enjoy these interviews we're having. And today, philosophy is really a lost art in science. I call it art, but it isn't really an art. It is philosophy is philosophy, obviously. It is very important. It's something that a lot of people don't realize. They go, oh, what's a philosophy? Well, you're going to find out a lot today. The importance of philosophy, well, before physics and cosmology, those words even existed. The word, I'm in physics, I'm a physicist. That was not a word, not too long ago in the human history. And it was called natural philosophy. That is looking at the philosophy of nature, the rules of nature. And philosophy is really not discussed in physics and cosmology. Well, if they did, and if they read Glenn Borchardt, they would soon discover the Standard Model spectacularly fails under the scrutiny of scientific philosophy. And this is where Glenn Borchardt, in my opinion, is one of the great, and not only dissidents and critical thinkers of our time, but one of the great philosophers of our time. And to me, he's already. He can retire and just stay in Lake Tahoe and do nothing because he's already given the world amazing stuff. But we're gonna pick his brain today. So Glenn Borchardt has identified 10 important assumptions in science. We're going to talk about those today. He's applied them to the standard model, and two of the things it blows away are in the pillars of physics and cosmology is the Big Bang and relativity. No, nothing big, nothing big at all. But of course, we'll be talking more about that. And there are followers, and these are just some. And these people I consider to be pretty high-level critical thinkers today. Stephen Bryant did a book on disrupting physics, and of course, that was very highly endorsed by Dr. Glenn Borchardt. George Coyne, if you didn't see, go back if you're in dissident science, look up dissident science, George Coyne, No Finity, and he has his book. He's got the second edition coming out. I'm helping him. Our organization is helping him publish that. It should be available soon on Amazon and other places. And of course, D. Hilster, the particle model, we stand on Borchardt's shoulders. Literally, my father and I would be, shooting pool and talking about Michigan and Ohio State football if it wasn't for Glenn Borchardt and his work, because our model wouldn't exist without it. So as one of my other favorite physicists, I'm going to get him to talk. If you haven't heard about him, his name's Dr. Alexander Unziger. He's a physicist from Germany, and he has the kahunas to stand up against particle physics and all the like. And what he says, if you are people who are critical thinkers, and I want to encourage you, because you're not coming to this channel only because you want to hear about critical thinkers of today. People outside the mainstream are pushing science forward. They're always outside because the mainstream will always push against it. Is keep on working on your passion. Keep working on your passion. I'm a linguist. I should get rid of the on. Dave, I'm supposed to correct this, but keep working on your own passion, whatever that is, and critical thinker, and we're here to help you do that. So that's the end of my commentary. Now I'm not gonna bring him up yet. He's probably sitting there. Dave, are you gonna bring me up? But I am. We're gonna talk today about infinity. Actually, Glenn Borchardt will be talking another time. We already have a time set up this month. Later in the month, we're going to be talking about the Big Bang, because the Big Bang is a big bust, but Glenn Borchardt is one of the great voices philosophically on that. So we're going to try to stay away from that so much today. But Dr. Glenn Borchardt is a geologist and scientific philosopher, initially developing the infinite universe theory, detailing its foundations in the 10 assumptions of science in 2004. In the Scientific Worldview 2007, Borchardt introduced the universal mechanism of evolution and neo-mechanics, which adapts classical mechanics to infinity. Glenn provided the philosophical and editorial guidance for the book that was actually on, I think, the universal cycle theory. But he does have a website. Actually, he's got this is the website. He has a website and a blog. His blog is, I think, hosted on the Google platform, so it's been around a while. So you can go to scientificphilosophy.org, and you can read about his Progressive Science Institute, and his latest book, of course, is Infinity Universe Theory. If you want to know more about Glenn, you can go to our Wikipedia at wiki.nationalphilosophy.org and just look up Glenn Borchardt. He's got a really good history of who he is, what he's done, and also he is on our Science Woke or Science Woke Critical the online science magazine for critical thinkers. He is on there as one of the featured scientists. And I'm going to read this in Glenn's own words. I think this is interesting, just to give you an example of what he has from his website. It says, I have over 50 years of theoretical, experimental, and observational experience as a scientist, especially interested in scientific philosophy. Although I have produced over 480 scientific reports, including journal articles, chapters, books, and computer programs, the best by far is my book, The Scientific Worldview Beyond Newton and Einstein, Understanding the Universal Mechanism of Evolution, and evolution in the sense of the universe, not everything in the universe that is evolving. And that was published in 2007. It poses the ultimate challenge to the current widely popular, though absurd, claim that the universe is finite and that it exploded out of nothing. The book is completely logical from the beginning to end in support of an infinite universe and a scientific philosophy approach that will replace the Big Bang Theory and the systems philosophy supporting it. The challenge for me is to get readers intelligent enough and educated enough to handle the ideas presented and understand the book's great significance. And that's very true. The paradigm that I propose is antithetical to conventional physics and astronomy, and cannot be taken seriously by those who hold the idealism of mathematics to be the true test of reality. A detailed technical review of infinite universe theory was published by Stephen Putz, who has also co-authored Universal Cycle Theory, and a follow-up book written by for the layperson, just released Infinite Universe Theory. I'm going to show you his books. Again, I think it's very important to get this before we talk to him, because we're going to be discussing his 10 assumptions of science, which are just absolutely astounding. That was the first time I really met him. I've got his book. Yeah, there you go. Those are harder to get. And he actually wrote something to me here. 10 Assumptions of Science presents a logical, coherent set of assumptions destined to define 21st century scientific philosophy. I will stand behind that 100%. I've known of this since 2004, and that is a true statement, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion. Glenn Borchardt first explains why assumptions and not absolutes are necessary for scientific thinking. By exploring the opposition between deterministic and indeterministic views, he clearly shows how critical choices among underlying assumptions either clarify or muddle scientific, scientific, oops, I'm going backwards. Okay, sorry about that. Scientific analysis. I didn't read the last word. There we go. All right. The second book in really his opus, whatever you want to call it, is right here. I've got it. It's the Scientific Worldview. You should all get it and read it. It should be must reading for every philosopher and also every science student on the planet. Presents a balanced theoretical perspective that has profound implications for social and physical sciences. Author Glenn Borchardt outlines philosophical alternatives to those necessary for consistent scientific and critical thinking. I should have put in there. And of course, there's another book, and actually, this is the book that gave me my aha moment with Borchardt. Even though this book is really about what's called the Universal Cycle Theory and was authored with Stephen Putz, I read the part that I really bought it more for Borchardt, and it blew my mind. I literally called him up. I think I read it in hours. I mean, I read most of the book. I read it in a day, most of the book. And his part, especially the parts about neomechanics and infinity and the levels of the universe, it was one of the four moments in my scientific career that just blew my mind. So I have a lot of, carinho, and I speak Portuguese, and it comes out in the wrong language. I have a lot of affection or a lot of love for this book personally, because it really exploded in my mind what Glenn was talking about. So it's still worth getting, even though it's half of it's about the universal cycle theory, which is a very interesting theory as well. It's very much worth. This book is worth buying. Infinity is crucial because it explains the extent and structure of the universe. We assume that the matter is infinitely divisible in the microscopic direction and infinitely integrable in the macroscopic direction. You know, my father and I use that. We don't go as much in the macroscopic, but I never could say that to people. I always say it's turtles all the way down and turtles all the way up. So he's great with words. This guy, I'm a linguist, but I look like a chump next to Borchardt. We assume that time was infinite in the past and will be infinite in the future. Greatly Borchardt. That is so great. This concept of infinity is unique, having never been employed in a model of the universe before. Absolutely, and now it's being employed in other models of the universe like ours. It resolves many of the paradoxes and contradictions currently riddling physics and cosmology. That is an understatement of the century. Then, of course, his latest book came out in 2017, easy reading. He sort of put it together. It's called The Infinite Universe Theory, presents the ultimate alternative to the Big Bang Theory. We're not going to talk about this as much because we're going to have him back to talk about this book and the infinite universe theory. But excuse me, I'll keep reading here. Author Glenn Borchardt starts with photos of the elderly galaxies at the observational edge of the universe. These contradict the current belief that the universe should be have increasingly younger objects as we view greater distances. He restates the fundamental assumptions that must underline the new paradigm, and that's what we're really going to talk about today. Notably, by assuming infinity, he is able to adapt classical mechanics to neo-mechanics and its insistence that the phenomena are strictly the result of matter in motion. He shows in detail how misinterpretations of relativity have aided current flights of fancy, more in tune with religion than science. Oh, okay. So I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to bring up our very special guest here to our broadcast, and that is Dr. Glenn Borchardt. And welcome, Glenn. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me on and all your work that you've done with CNPS. I really appreciate that. It's the kind of work I would have loved to do, but I had to do some philosophy, and that's and you know what that is, writing all these books and so on, and along with Steve Pitts and so on. And so, one of the problems that has been common in science is that, I got a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy. I never had a course in philosophy ever. And you know why that is? The philosophy that is taught in most philosophy departments is religious. And in science, that's the opposite. So we don't find that very useful. And so that's what, now, of course, if you look at the Big Bang folks and so on, what they're doing is using religious assumptions, essentially. And that's why they get what they do. And that's why they don't use any philosophy, because they don't know what it is. They don't know what the fundamental assumptions should be. And that's, of course, what we did in 10 assumptions. And once you do that, you are on your way to changing the world and having the last cosmological revolution in hand. And if you don't like the 10 assumptions that, you showed the book and so on, if you don't like those, make your own. Remember, they have to be concepanable. And I guess that's your next subject.
Yeah, I got concepanable. In fact, I'm going to add this up here. Let me, that was my favorite, most misunderstood word, and this is my favorite philosophical word. I mean, it sounds so amazing, and in fact, what's very funny, Glenn, is when I was making these slides, you have, of course, PowerPoint, and PowerPoint has a dictionary of English words, quite extensive. One of the words it doesn't have is concepanability. Why don't you tell us what concepanable means? What does that mean?
Yeah, that was invented in 1940 by Collingwood, and I was much influenced by his book, Essay on Metaphysics. Usually metaphysics is thought of as religious, but he did both the religious and the scientific way of studying metaphysics. And in metaphysics, what he claimed is that if you're going to have more than one assumption, they both have to be concepanable. Now, con means with, and supponable means supposable. So if you're going to suppose, say, assumption A and then assumption B as well, they can't contradict each other. They have to be concepanable. Now, all 10 assumptions, if you'll note, when you read the 10 assumptions of science, they all include infinity, and they're all concepanable with infinity. Now, if you have big bangers, they believe in a finite universe and the beginning and end and so on for the universe, they cannot possibly use infinity. But of course, you have to remember that Newton and all his followers used infinity. And now we're changing over to realizing the universe is not finite. There's nothing finite, anything, anywhere. So No two things are alike. No two people are alike, even identical twins. So that's what we're talking about in the 10 assumptions of science. Consupponability. If you're going to have more than one assumption, it better not contradict your other assumptions. And that's the idea of consupponability. And it's not going to be in any dictionary because it contradicts the idea that many people have, that you can have different assumptions that contradict each other. And this is very common. And this is
Oh, it is very common.
yeah,
I mean,
very common.
when I hear people who are talking about, for instance, their own theories or their own ideas, right? You
Mhm.
can hear them constantly. This is why I love this word. You can hear them constantly. What they'll do is I'll have discussions, especially obviously if you're a dissident or critical thinker and you're going against mainstream, you get into conversations with people. But during those conversations, especially me, I'm a linguist, so I hang on every word and what a person's trying to mean with that saying that word. You inevitably they'll say X, and that's an assumption, right? And then they're talking wrong, and then they say Y, and you go wait a minute. You said X, well, no, they're not related, and they are related. And I think that's, I how is it that when I mean, you weren't the one who came up with this word. Who was the first? Where did you first
That
see
was
this
Collingwood.
word?
Yeah, in
Collingwood.
1940.
Okay.
Yeah,
1940.
yeah.
Now that gets me to a question I have for you in general. Okay, you're a geologist by trade, right? Now,
Earth science. Yeah,
Earth sciences.
yeah.
Okay, so why? How did you get in philosophy? One of the things that struck me that I was really impressed with you is how you knew your philosophers. It's really funny. One of the things that we in critical thinker and dissidence world, whatever you want to call it, get criticized for is, oh, Glenn Borchardt, he just threw out all philosophy and invented his own. How stupid is that? That's absolutely not true. When I talk with you, and when I've talked with you and have seen you talk before, your stuff is based on you've read so much philosophy. Tell us who are the people who influenced you philosophically in your journey as a philosopher?
Well, remember this fellow R.G. Collingwood, who talked about these necessity to have assumptions that are consupponable, like you said. Now, there's some other requirements that he taught me, and one of them was that assumptions always have an opposite. The fundamental ones do. In science we use thousands of assumptions, but the fundamental ones always have opposites, like materialism and immaterialism, causality, acausality. They're opposites. And the second thing is they cannot be proven. We say in science, all effects have causes. All right. Well, that's an assumption. That's a faith. We can't prove that. Every time we use that assumption, it works. It works trillions of times, but you cannot completely prove that because there are an infinite number of causes for even one effect. That's the
Right.
problem. You can't do that.
Right.
So, yeah, so I had a lot of experience learning from other philosophers. It's like Spinoza. Deterministic philosophers were my favorite because they were using science. And the religious ones, like even Hegel, who was a dualist, he came up with one of the assumptions I use. Matter is always in motion. What is it? There can be no matter without motion, no motion without matter. Okay.
Right. Right.
That is so fundamental to science.
Oh,
And he, of course, he thought there was cause and effect, and following from Newton, and then mechanically, and then he would talk about the spirit. That's his dualism. See, and this is very common among philosophers who got famous because religion, of course, was been very, very popular for
right.
during the millennia, and so he was one of the fellows that really influenced me a lot. And then, of course, I read some of the offshoots from that. You can read Marx, Lenin. All of those fellows were deterministic. They were not spiritualists or anything like that. And then, of course, there were others that I saw as bad examples, like Deepak and Sheldrake and so on, these folks that are trying to put religion into science and say, well, they're compatible and so on. Though that's not what I'm about. What I'm about is strictly science.
Right.
That's why
right.
we call our site scientificphilosophy.org. Well, that's what we're about. It's amazing we could even get that, that domain.
Right.
And
Right.
so you know how hard it is to get a good
Oh,
domain.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We
Sure.
picked that up early on. And so in that website, we say we do not do politics or religion. So when
Right. Right.
I get some people who want to talk religion and politics, but I don't include them in the discussions because what we're trying to discuss is the offshoots of the 10 assumptions of science. That's the foundation of what I say is going to be the next scientific philosophy, the next, like I say, infinite universe theory will be the next cosmology. And it's
Right.
all founded on these 10 assumptions. And
Right.
that's what everything I do is founded on.
Right, right. No, that's very it's very critical for people to, especially people who are new to our organization, to get to understand the philosophy is very important. The other the other thing you said too is you're interested in the scientific philosophy. It's not bashing people's religious beliefs. It's just saying, look, science works this way. And we need to look at science in this manner. Now, I'm going to put up here another word that I got from your 10 assumptions of science here that you talk about. And you talk about metaphysics. Now, this is a loaded word, right? I mean, this is a word that I know you discuss here in the introduction of your 10 assumptions. I'm sure it's probably in the scientific worldview as well. But it's two views of metaphysics. You say metaphysics is sense one, metaphysics is nonsense. Sense two, metaphysics is the study of presuppositions. Maybe you can talk about that.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. What Collingwood had said, and he's right, he said that metaphysics is what goes beyond physics. All right. So religious folks think there's some spirit or whatever that goes beyond religious. That's the nonsense part, I believe. And then the second is what goes beyond physics is more physics. I really like that because with an infinite universe, there's more physics, more physics. It just doesn't end. And that's
Right.
so that I still use the word metaphysics, although normally people think of it as nonsense or religious or whatever, and therefore not useful. But I think as scientists, we really need to know much more about philosophy and not all the correct philosophy. That's what I'm trying to push is scientific philosophy, not having any religious miracles or anything like that.
Right, right. Now I'm going to do something now. I know this is going to break it up a little bit, but I keep forgetting. I make these really great intros for you guys, right? The people coming on.
Yeah,
And I
it's
didn't
good.
show it again. I have to put something on my screen that says, Dave, show the nice video intro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break reel here, and I'm going to show you the impressive little introduction that should have been in the beginning. So bear with me for a few seconds here,
Sure
and we'll put
will.
that up.
Sounds good.
I always forget that. I make them every week, and I don't throw it in there. They're very impressive looking there, but
Well, that was great. You did a good job with the music and everything.
oh well.
Wow.
No, actually, they have services you can do that, and you put them together. And the internet's a different world
Yeah,
today.
isn't
But
it? And I'm learning if, I'm pretty far behind, but you're right up there getting this figured out.
that's what I'm supposed to do. So
Yeah.
anyway, so I thought that was interesting, the metaphysics, because it's something that if you're thinking, and especially if you're listening to you, if people are a student of yours, they're going the words unfortunately have a lot of some of them have bad connotations. When people say metaphysics, oh, it's that like, I'm going to drift off into another dimension and all that. But what you're saying is that word is still useful in the scientific philosophical sense, but it's not the same meaning as the colloquial meaning,
Great.
right?
Yeah, just
Right.
to tell you how bad it is the situation was I was at the UC Berkeley Library, I think, on 3 occasions. I came across this book of Collingwood's essay on metaphysics, and I recommend everybody read that and sort out the scientific part anyway. And I would look at that, and then I'd put it back on the shelf. I did that like 3 times. Finally, I said, let me look at this a little bit more. And golly, he was really good. Now he's an idealist philosopher, which is on the religious side, of course, but he really had these wise statements about how fundamentals always have opposites and how you can never prove them. You can't prove them 100%, and that you have to choose between the different assumptions. And he called them presuppositions. In other words, everybody has presuppositions. When you walk across the floor, you have a presupposition that you're not going to fall through the floor, right? And if you recognize that and state it verbally or write it down, then it becomes an assumption. And that's why the book is called The 10 Assumptions of Science, not the 10 Presuppositions of Science, because they're written down there. Now you can study them, you can debate them, you can decide to choose the opposites if you wish. They're there though, and they're consupponable. Those are the ones that are. And so that's what he taught me. And so I remember metaphysics was a bad word. It had a lot of garbage.
Right, of course.
Baggage on it. And I just at first thought, well, this is more of the same, and I don't want to bother with it. And sure enough, he had some really great points.
Yeah, I mean, it's really one of the interesting things I've learned. I've been through that myself. Is I've actually learned. I especially in this organization, somebody may come up with a crazy idea, even non-consupponable ideas. But what I've found is when I would go to our conferences, or I watch these interviews, or have somebody on who has a totally different idea of the way the universe works. Even like I said, even if it's not consupponable, it opens your eyes in some way, right? You always can learn a lot if you take the time maybe to look at a different point of view where you think you're not going to find something.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's just an attitude people need to have. It's like a lot of times we'll have somebody on, and their ideas a little bit out there, and they go, why do I need to spend time with this? Well, the reason you need to spend time, in my opinion, is people have thought about it. Like you said, they had philosophers who wrote books about it, and they spent a lot of time on this. There's going to be something in there for you, whether or not it's knowing everything in there is wrong and why. I mean, that could be one. Or it could be something like you said, you pick up a book and say, okay, I'll read it. And then all of a sudden you're going, oh my gosh, there is something there. Okay, we're going to take another word here, which I know is a big, this is really interesting for a lot of people. Oops, there we go. Sorry about that. Deterministic. Now, this whole idea that that everything in the universe is, or we have free will and all that. Can you talk a little bit about your own personal philosophy? I know George Coyne has the same one. He actually talked about it in Consciousness, that people want, this whole idea of free will and everything. I know that sort of ties in what we talk with Coyne. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, determinism says there are causes for all effects. They're physical causes. Essentially, microcosm A, which is how I state things, and interacts with microcosm B. So you have one thing hitting another, colliding with it. And according to Newton's law, that's what the cause of all events happens to be. And in the case of determinism, we say, well, there are causes for all effects. Now, your will, whatever, also is physically caused. And had every person you know of will have a long background that helps them decide what they decide. And you can't say you have free will, because free will would be acausal. It would mean that there's no physical cause for what you just thought, but there is. That's our assumption. Remember, it's an assumption. We can't prove that. You can always say, well, I have free will. I can walk across the room and not, and so on. And we all live that way. We live with that sort of illusion, or we kind of ignore it. We're not going to sit there and think, well, now this finger is doing that, and the causes are all. We don't do that. But we have to realize that theoretically, that's how the universe works. And if you don't believe that, then you have a problem, because you can't understand it. You'll be all kinds of time, like you won't be able to understand the crazy things people do. And they often do crazy things, but you look at their backgrounds, and sometimes they're horrific. They've been beaten as a child and so on, and abused in various ways. And then you're wondering why they have this free will that causes them to do crimes. Come on. That's why look at my background. I had wonderful parents. I never had any of that problems. I just, had a wonderful time growing up, and so far my life is just wonderful too. So I can't really sympathize too much with somebody who has criminal tendencies, but I understand where they're coming from. You see, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, and I think that I have that feeling as well, in the sense of just people, because we're always looking. It was curious to me because when you're growing up, you always see the good guy and the bad guy, the people in the black hats and the people in the white hats, right? And you're thinking to yourself, well, these are just bad people. They were born that way. But you end up thinking, I mean, it's a really a great experiment. Then I thought, as I got older, I said, okay, if I take two babies and I put them in this situation, and I put the other baby in this situation, then yeah, that's a whole nature and nurture. But there is a consequences to the things around you, and of course, that's one of the things about philosophy and about your work that goes beyond just. I mean, it's part of science that is as well. But I always now when I look at somebody, and this has been many decades now. I'll look at somebody and there's some problem or they do something. They're always saying, oh, kill that guy or put him in jail, or and you think to yourself, wait a minute, you're a product of your environment, and that's one of the things that infinity talks about is you're a product of all the infinite above and all the infinite below. So that's really interesting how philosophy jumps from science to free will, and it's not easy. It's not easy for us to think that the reason I'm going to stop right here. The reason I just stopped is not because I have free will. It's because of all the other things that are going on in the universe that made me get the logic I have, put the logic in my brain, come up with these things and talk with you. All those things are the product of all the things, infinite things below and above. And I mean, it almost sounds metaphysical until if you really take it in a mechanical world, it's a very different. It's funny when I say those, my one side of my brain has an emotional side that you're a product of everything around. It's like it sounds that's philosophical, but it doesn't sound scientific. But it's very scientific, and that's one of the things that you talk about in your books. So let's go forward here. I've got more for us to talk about before we get into it. We're going to take a look now at the, whoops, wrong button. Sorry about this, folks. I got to put this up here. There we go. The nature of assumptions and the philosophical terms. So we're going to get into, I'm going to show these 10 assumptions of science. And you've already talked about some of them. And I think one of the interesting parts that you've already talked about is this opposites, right? I mean, you see all the deterministic assumptions versus indeterministic assumptions of the 10 assumptions of science. And as you say, this is the other thing that I think is great. It says, these are mine, right? These are Glenn Borchardt's. And I also asked you about 10. It was 10. And so again, you can see the two sides about how each one of these have an opposite. Why don't we start with like number one, materialism and immaterialism? Let's talk about that. How talk about what that means, what means to you in your 10 assumptions.
Right. Well, materialism, historically, it always talked about the universe is made out of matter. And that's what we do in science. We are materialists because we work with matter. Things hitting things, that's it. So now immaterialism is the opposite, and it says no. Actually, what is, like Chopra says, you are the center of the universe, and your consciousness determines the universe. Remember, Berkeley was a famous indeterministic philosopher who said, when I leave the room, the chair I sat on disappears. Why was that? Well, because he couldn't see it anymore. So that's the opposite. And there are these elements all the time, like Sheldrake and Chopra. They are pushing immaterialism. And from that, then they accommodate religion, which in the case of Chopra has made him millions because he does alternative medicine and claims that the universe has been produced by his consciousness. And I hope he lives a long time because I want to see the universe for a long time.
Yeah, so I think there's a whole world of philosophers out there that a lot of the the average person doesn't know. Even the average person who's a critical thinker doesn't really look at too much, because I think, again, the materialism is where most physics and cosmology tries to lie within, right? We think of the universe and we're trying to look at the matter and motion and matter. Let's talk about that as well. You have this whole idea of what matter or motion is. And I think one of the interesting things that we had on our database about 10 years ago, I had people had the ability to go in and put their definitions in, which is really quite interesting. What they think time is, what they think mass is, what they think all those kinds of things are. And you had the most succinct definition for time. And what is your definition for time? It's one word, right?
Yeah, motion. So it's motion. Yeah,
right.
It doesn't exist, it occurs. So, and it's not part of the universe. Only matter is part. Matter has XYZ dimensions. So I am made of matter. I have XYZ dimensions, but I'm not made of motion. I move. As long as I'm still alive, I will be moving. When I'm dead, I won't be moving. And that's true of everything in the universe. So time is it is. Now, I was interesting that I forget who it was saying, I think it was George Coyne, who said, well, you really should include matter. Time is the motion of matter, because there are some people who think that there's motion without matter. And that's typical of modern physics, that there's motion without matter. And that is nonsensical. That's my fourth assumption, inseparability. There can be no matter without motion, no motion without matter. And of course, many indeterministic physicists will actually think of motion. Like, for example, when Einstein talked about fields, he didn't think of them as material. He didn't. He went back and forth, and they still do that in physics. Are there particles?
Still do that, yeah.
Yeah, are there particles in these fields or not? Or are they just motion? Without, in other words, matterless motion. And we do have people still trying to push the idea of matterless motion. That is motion without matter, and that's contrary. That's an indeterministic assumption, the opposite of inseparability, which is assumption number 4.
Right. Now, when we're talking about, that's interesting that you said that George Coyne talked about, well, it's not just motion, it's motion of mass or matter, I'm sorry.
Right.
And I think it's interesting that my father and I, when we talk about time, it's, we talk about, well, it's sort of our invention of how we measure motion. I mean, that's it's our way of measuring motion. And here's a question for you, and I think it's from my father. I'm not going to be able to take this, or maybe it was from one of our discussions. We have discussions like this all the time now that he lives in my house here. Is time a human concept? Or is that we've come up and we need, and the universe doesn't need it? Is it just motion in the universe, and the time part is what we have put upon that?
Remember, in all of science, there's 2 things that go on. There's the actual thing or motion, the thing that exists, or the motion that occurs. What we do as physicists, we try to measure those. So when you measure time, you have to have a clock, right? If you have an hourglass or whatever you are measuring, or you can calculate the cyclicity of the Earth, so on, rotating and going around the sun. So those are measurements. Time is motion. The dinosaurs didn't have measurements, but they certainly had time. 60 million years, a long time. So they did very well without any measurement at all. Other people think of time as an illusion. That's not an illusion. Motion occurs, and if you think it's an illusion, then then you're missing something, because time has caused you to lose hair and perhaps teeth and other such things, and there obviously is some motion going on there, and so that is what time is. It's simply motion. And I don't know, my epitaph may have time is motion written on it, because that seems to be really, really hard for physicists who have been influenced by Einstein, who used time as a thing, as a dimension, and confused everyone. And time is just simply motion. It doesn't exist. You can't grab a fistful of time and take it home with you. You can't do that.
Yeah, we should talk about another word here. let me put this up here. And this sort of goes in with the what we're just talking about here. So let me put that up here, and that is space-time. Now, this isn't in the in your well. You talk about this. I think the interesting part about this is, where does space-time go wrong? That's let's put it this way. There's a lot of people that sort of have that same feeling, who are critical thinkers. But you, Glenn Borchardt, have really, because of your 10 assumptions and neo-mechanics and infinity, have really pinpointed where this goes wrong. Can you talk about where this goes wrong?
Oh, that's a good question. Space-time is a matter-motion term, and matter-motion terms don't describe anything that exists or occurs, because they're multiplications. An example is momentum. Momentum is P equals mv, mass times velocity. Now, do you have a pocket full of momentum you could give me? That'd be nice. Just like, not possible. So that's a calculation. There's no such thing as momentum. What there is things moving. And we are trying to, as physicists, we're trying to describe that. Space-time, same thing. For example, I'm sitting at this desk right now. I'm in a certain space-time position. Tomorrow I'll be sitting here again, and that'll be a different space-time position. It'll be the same space, but there'll be a different time. Motion, the Earth will have moved in the meantime, and so on. So that's the usefulness of space-time. As Einstein used it, he sort of was, and I've studied his stuff quite a bit. I think he's using it for ether. And he dumped ether and said there was empty space. And the space-time, as used in the calculations of general relativity and so on, is like, for example, you have curvature of around the Earth, or about around the sun, or whatever. And of course, that's done by refraction. But also, he considered it a bending or curvature of space-time. You see, so whether it's part of the corona or ether or whatever, the curvature around the sun is a fact, and it's been measured. And well, what is it? Is it space-time? Is it due to space? No, it's not done. Nothing to do with space-time. It has to do with what is in that part of the corona, the atmosphere of the sun. So that's what that's about. And so space-time has some use. Like I said, you can use it to talk about your space and the space-time position in the past and what it might be in the future. But there's no such thing as that, just like there's no such thing as momentum or energy or force. These things don't exist. These are all calculations. They're just calculations. And physicists, you use it so often, you finally think, well, there are forces. There are forces. What are forces? Are they little magic hands? They're not. They're things. What they are is calculations of things moving. That's all they are.
Yeah, there are definitely calculations. My dad talks about that too. We talk about it constantly. And if you got matter and motion. I think one of the things that is what went wrong too with space-time is that people took it as Einstein's theory of relativity is very sort of in the non-Borchardt way, sort of metaphysical. Tell us where do you see that coming from? What was their logic? Because you're a philosopher, you can do much better than I can. What was their logic? I always explain it this way. I say, well, there's space, which is the place matter is moving, right? And time, which is motion, pretty much related to motion itself. You can't put those two things together and create a something. Why don't you give those people who are new to the philosophy and who've heard of space-time, give us your explanation as a modern philosopher, what they did and what they did wrong with that, and why it can't really be. Does that make sense?
You have to define what existence is. Now, my definition of existence is a thing that takes up XYZ portion of the universe. That's existence. So now that's matter. Okay, I can't add time to a piece of matter. This is not, because time doesn't exist, it occurs. So I can take a bit of time and add it to matter. And I think that's what Einstein is trying to do. And it's philosophically not correct. And he's got away with it. And of course, 4 dimensions and so on. And you need the four dimensions in order to have the Big Bang. You can't have it without four-dimensional space-time ideas. You have to have people who think that there could be four dimensions. You can do the math. That's not a problem. The big thing is, can you add motion or time? Now, all motions are time. Are you going to add that to matter? Are you going to add that to the universe? You can't do that. And
so part of it comes from, I don't mean to interrupt, just sort of because I know I've heard, I've talked with you and heard you talk. Part of it comes from the idea that space-time is linguistically, because I'm a linguist, space-time is a noun. A noun is a thing, a person, place, or thing. It's matter, right?
Right.
That's what it is. So the reason you started out with your explanation now, and I'm just trying to maybe clarify with some people, about matter, is that space-time, they say, is something. It bends. In fact, I remembered when I went with Dr. Karazani when I was doing my film Einstein Wrong. Well, we went to it was the year 2005, and they were worshiping Einstein for his miracle year, right? Well, there's a guy there, of course, with the proverbial cone, or what do they call it? A cone where you put the coin in and it goes around, or the balls, and they go, this is how space-time works and gravity works. Well, Dr. Karazani, who is a brilliant mind, he really is a brilliant mind. He went up to the guy who's just the guy there who's a volunteer who likes science, and he goes, this here, what is this? And he goes, what? He says, no, this here. He goes, oh, that's space-time. He says, but if it's space-time, what's bending? And the guy starts to try to answer it and everything, and he gets really flustered. He gets so flustered that he goes, excuse me, everyone, I need to take a break.
Hell yeah. Yeah, whenever we reach a contradiction, we have to take a break. In science, you're always finding new things. Your theory doesn't quite work, so then you have to go back through it again. And I've had that many a time when you get epiphany. You get an actual result that you got by sleeping on it, maybe.
Right.
And so that can happen. So, but I remember a philosopher that I was listening to. Oh my, what was his name? He had a stutter problem. And whenever he came across a contradiction, somebody would ask him a question, he couldn't answer. He would start stuttering and mumbling more, and you couldn't hear what he was saying. And so that's what people do when they have a contradiction. And I think that's great the way you showed that.
Yeah, it's another story like that. And I actually it was in one of my videos. Those people who are my subscribers to my YouTube channel. I do these, sort of monologues with, graphics and all that stuff. And one of, I talk about the science evangelists out there, because all they do really is
they're great. Yeah.
Yeah. The one I like is where somebody actually, to Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's not a scientist, if you go to the international database of movies, he's an entertainer. That's what he really is. And he is. Right. He's not a scientist anyway. Yeah. That's the one part I have in one of my videos, and I play it over in slow motion and all that, is they go, so one of my readers, or one of my subscribers, Mr. Tyson, asking me is if when Einstein's relativity be wrong, or is it wrong, and when will it be accepted that it is wrong? His answer wasn't a philosophical one. It wasn't that, it's going to be wrong because, or actually no theory is right, it's just less wrong than the last one. He laughed, because at that point, he didn't even go, when you're getting questions, normally you work your way up to the place where you don't have an answer, and then you start stuttering, or you go on your break. Well, Tyson went directly to a laugh. He didn't even make a statement about that. So
but as an evangelist, he has to do that, because that's the line, and he's one of the biggest Big Bang pushers in the world. And he every other word he says, Big Bang this and Big Bang that. And of course, the Big Bang, everything in the cosmos is interpreted in terms of the Big Bang and the expansion of the universe, which is hypothesized as well. So that is what he's pushing. And so that you're right. You're right to call him an evangelist, because that's what he's doing. He's 100% believer, that's for sure. And four dimensions doesn't bother him a bit.
Yeah. String theory, all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm going to bring up another word that actually my father, I don't think he's here, but he did want to, he wanted to, I'm going to relay that story to you. This is a word that really stuck in that my father, I said, what's the first thing you remember when you met or heard Dr. Borchardt speak? Now, my father is an absolute student of yours like I am. And our model will not exist without yours. It's only about matter in motion for every force in the universe. It's a little different from yours, but only in a small way. But the infinity is definitely there. But this was the word, and I think this was the most overused word. There was two real overused words in the dissident world, especially. One was field. The other one is this word. So maybe we can take a look at this word. There it is, our famous word, energy. And my father, was listening, and he really didn't think too much about it. But you were saying, well, energy is a concept. There's nothing you can hand me. It's like momentum. It's a mathematical. And one of the things I tell people is, well, here's a clue that energy is a concept. What's the exact units of energy? Well, they change with every situation. So it's a very useful concept. But why don't you talk a little bit about energy? Because I hear that even in the I have the comments going on here. When we're done, we're going to take a look at some of the comments and have people come on and talk with you or question, give you some questions.
Yeah.
Talk about this one because this is a
Yeah, the word energy is another matter motion term. In other words, if you do the calculation E equals mc squared, you're multiplying matter, that's mass, times velocity squared. So that is another example of matter motion terms. Now, the way I say that in the book, I say matter dash motion. So there is no such thing. What it is essentially a word that is a result of a calculation. In this case, a concept calculation, same thing. And we use that all over the place, and it's indispensable in physics. But you have to realize what it is. It is not a thing. I can't take a piece of energy and put it in my pocket. This is how I determine what is matter and what is motion. I can put a frog in my pocket, but I can't put jumping in my pocket. So if I want to talk about the energy involved in the frog, I might have the mass of the frog times the amount of the distance that it traveled, and then I could calculate perhaps the energy expended. And so that's what energy is about. Now, one place where you will notice this being very, very important, and I have written a paper on that, the physical meaning of E equals mc squared. Now, what is commonly said is that mass turns into energy. Well, that's not possible because energy doesn't exist. So what happens? Well, what happens if you have fusion? You may have some motion that exits as well as matter from whatever fusion or fission, I should say, whatever fission occurred. And what you'll have is some emission of motion, but the motion of matter, right? That's why when you have the E equals mc squared equation, people will say it turned into energy, which was what? Well, what it really is the motion outside that particular microcosm that has actually fissioned, and that some of that motion is transmitted to the environment. What's in the environment? That's where ether is required, because you have to have something to transfer that motion to. In all of the energy studies, that's what we do. We saw falling water, turbines moving, moving this, moving that. That's all we're doing. We're making the calculations. And so we can't store any energy in our pockets. It doesn't exist. But the water exists, the turbines exist, and we can make calculations about what those effects are. And that's what energy is about. So that's why I say energy does not exist. And I think most conventional physicists will say, oh, yeah, it exists. It exists. Yeah, I differ. And that's
Oh no,
because,
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. When I try, I guess what I do a lot of times when I'm talking with the average person who, they find out that me and my father and I are writing a book about the model of the entire universe, and people can't grasp that that's even possible. If someone comes up to you and says that, people won't believe you. But we start talking about it, and you said, well, I'll give you some examples of how our current science isn't working very well. It's like energy. Energy isn't a real thing. They go, "Are you kidding? Energy, blah 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 blah." And then what I do is I try to, as a linguist, I always look. Why does the word energy exist? What do people really mean by energy? And to me, I think what the colloquial meaning of energy is the idea of having something that can be transformed into motion. Really.
right, right,
If you have, so the energy in your gas tank is a bunch of mass that you can transform into the motion of your vehicle, something useful.
yeah,
So it's sort of a way to say that, oh, in here in this volume, I have this motion. I mean, this matter that's moving around, and that I can manipulate it in such a way that I can get motion from that, and I sort of look at it that way. That way they don't feel so bad about, like, well, then it doesn't matter, because then, a lot of times people say, well, we use that all the time. What does it mean? But I think a problem too is critical thinkers overuse that. Fields and energy. You hear that, I think, my idea of the universe, it's made of all this energy and we're all part of that same
yeah,
energy, blah, blah,
right,
blah.
right. And that's what, remember that the Big Bang theorists say that there's dark energy.
Yeah.
And remember, energy doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so what they call it dark because they can't see anything luminous connected with it. See,
Right.
if you had dark matter that was in energy, then that'd be okay. But they don't associate dark matter with dark energy. Dark energy is this mysterious thing that causes this tremendous inflation that they required to have in the Big Bang, right? So then, therefore, the energy is being used there. I think a lot of people think of energy as motion, which it is not.
Right.
It is
Right.
not. It is
Right.
a description of motion, the motion of matter, and that's what it is. And you have to always realize that. But I think a lot of people just think of energy as motion because, I'm energetic, right? When I put my hands, I'm moving my hands and I'm very energetic and so on. And they think of that energy displayed there as motion. But of course, it's motion here, right? This is motion, but it's not energy.
Right.
And if I calculate what I just did, I'll get the calories and so on.
Right, right. Well, let's get to infinity again. Oops, I got to do it from this slide on. Here we go. Um, this is why I need a person who's doing this. Once we get millions of
Those are
followers.
great. I'm glad you had these up here.
Oh no, no, I know. Hey, listen, I'm a student of yours for many years. So
Yeah,
and
thanks
and
so
and,
much.
and well, no, I mean the idea of having you on is, just to let you know, is that people. We have a lot of new people joining our organization because
Uh-huh.
of our work on, YouTube, on our website, on Facebook as well. And these people don't know. I'll talk about Borchardt, and I sort of get blank stares. Whereas, of course, the older guys in our guys and gals in our organization know about you. So we're going to talk about these three words, which are really, really important to infinity. And what I think I talked to you with about this, and you would maybe dispute it, but I'm pretty sure I was the one who was trying to understand this. And it was like, you always heard it's turtles all the way down, meaning, what's the turtle, if the Earth's on a turtle's back, what's the turtle standing on, or the universe, right? This is the old philosophical. And then, well, no, there's a turtle and below that. And they says, well, below that. And he said, well, it's turtles all the way down. Well, then I took that same idea and said, well, it's turtles all the way up. And won't you explain to people, I mean, this is such an important concept. It gives us the ability to, in the infinite universe, to talk about it in our local way, right? Because in the end, we are not, we all carry infinity inside us, and we're part of an infinity above us as well. But this really is a really wonderful, especially unicosm. I'm not sure. Did you come up with that word?
I didn't use it was univironment, but let me
Oh,
explain
univironment.
how the micro and macro came about. Remember,
Should I change this to environment instead of cosm?
univironment would be better, but you can change it later. Uh, Unicosm, that's kind of interesting. Although, it's sort of like universe. Remember, one of my uh, beefs about the current cosmology, they talk about multiverses and so on. Doesn't make sense because there's what we talk about universe. That's one. That's what we have is universe. But in regard to these words, micro and macro, I studied systems philosophy quite a bit. That's kind of like just studying philosophers, and what they do is they say, well, we have a system, and like you may have a car, for example, and that's a system. And you study the whole thing, and you ignore the environment because you can study the car without it moving or anything. And that's a microcosm. So instead of using a system, I use microcosm. Instead of using thing, I use microcosm. And why is that? Because every microcosm in the universe has a macrocosm, that is an environment. So systems philosophers will admit that there is an environment around their systems, like your car. There's an environment, and if you drive it in the wrong way, you find out more about that. So the microcosm is a thing, and the macrocosm is everything around it. Now, at first, we tried to figure out, well, now, what really happens, and the univironmental analysis thing came about because I was with Elizabeth Patelke, a friend of mine, and we tried to figure out what's a good word. What was Now, environmental determinism said that the environment determined what happens. Like it's the old nature nurture thing. So they're saying, no, well, the nature is more important than the nurture. Well, actually, they're both equally important. See, so that's a univironment. We combine uni with environment. So a univironment is the microcosm and the macrocosm acting together to produce univironmental determinism. So that means that whatever happens to a thing in the universe is determined by the within and without. And that's true of you and I. We are going to be influenced by the within and without. If you don't like for example, sociologically, it has some advantage. If you don't like your current situation, change it. Change your environment. And guess what? You will change. That's why we go to college. That's why we learn. That's why we do books and videos like this. That's what that's about. So that's the univironmental mechanism. That's the universal mechanism of evolution. And that displaces and replaces neo-Darwinism. Remember, neo-Darwinism says there's two factors involved in evolution: the biology, that's genetics, and the environment, natural selection. And that's just a special case of univironmental determinism. Being an earth scientist, I noticed that soils evolve. That's my specialty. Soils evolve, rocks evolve, the planet evolves. But neo-Darwinism wasn't useful for that because there were no genes involved. So this univironmental determinism is the universal mechanism of evolution. I'm very proud of that because you don't go anywhere else with that. And the other thing was that at first, when I gave the definition of univironmental determinism, I forgot to put in infinity. So it's the infinite number of things inside and infinity outside. That's where the infinite universe theory comes about. Simply growing up from univironment. All of us do that. We think along certain paths, and then this is how you go from microcosm to macrocosm. And it says, oh, wow, is that finite out there? Is there ever a microcosm without a macrocosm? Like the big bangers say? They say, well, you have this finite universe, and there is hypothesizing that it exists by itself. It doesn't. It can't. But again, these are always assumptions. We're assuming there's an infinity and that there's always something outside of everything. And that's where those words came from, and I hope everybody can understand that the uni part, univironment, and you'll have to take a look at that and study that, because whenever you study something, univironment is really univironment. So yeah, I would put in uni environment and knock out. Well, you have microcosm, macrocosm, and univironment, and that would be the
Yeah, I was trying to be cute here, and I think that
yeah,
was
microcosm, macrocosm, and univironment. Whoop, there you go. Wow, it's great. You can do that.
macrocosm, and
Yeah,
then
and then just environment. Knock out.
univironment. I got it. I got it.
Yeah, that'll be good. Okay. Back off and univironment, environment.
We got it.
Yeah, it's in environment. It's environment with the uni, just combining the microcosm and the macrocosm, and I think it's wonderful. It tells you all you need to know about infinity, really. So, like you're saying, microcosm. There you have, like Aristotle said, you can divide matter up infinitely. And he didn't think that the universe, the macrocosm, was that way. It turns out Newton thought the macrocosm was infinite, but that the microcosm was finite. And the reason he said the macrocosm was infinite, because he said, well, if everything in the universe attracted everything else, it would all come into one big lump. And that isn't what we see. So therefore, it must be infinite. So that's how. So those two guys had the micro and the macro separate, but I just combined them.
Yeah, I mean, boy, this controls. I'm sorry, people are going to get seasick with my controlling my uni environment here is not going so well.
Your environment is not working out. That's okay.
I think here's one of the things that I really really like about the infinite universe, infinity, is one of the things we're always talking about is this idea of, I think the thing that bothers me about the multiverses, or there are parallel universes, right? The thing that bothered me was, where are they? I mean, where are they located? And people say they're just in another dimension. That never flew with me. But then when infinity came along, I thought, wow, there are an infinite amount of unicosms, right? And those themselves, you can almost think of, inside me, who knows? It just goes down and down and down. There's probably whole, planets with people running around. Who knows?
Don't know about that, but
yeah, what I don't know.
We don't know. We can't.
We don't know. We can't say. But what I'm saying is, regardless of whatever it is, I'm just making it to make it so people can visualize it, right? Whatever it is, I'm holding within myself all these, worlds, more or less. If you look again at a not an infinite level, but a sort of a local level. But everything has a place.
Right. Yeah.
You're not occupying a space somewhere where there are two people in your place, right? It's always like the problem with the transporter in Star Trek, right?
Yeah,
if I transport you both to the same coordinates, what's going to happen? I don't know. You explode? I don't know what's going to happen. But the whole I think the infinity part that I like about it intuitively, sort of, and I've gotten a feel for, is that there's all these things that can be really complex and very, lots of movement going on, but there is nothing happening in some other dimension. It's got its own place. And if there are other planets and beings inside it, levels way, way, way down, they have its place, and it's not in the way of something else going on in the universe. So
it's like what happened is that Kashlinsky and his gang found that galaxies were tending to move in a certain preferential direction in the observed universe. And so what that implied is that there was a huge mass outside of the observed universe. That's how, if you look at our universal cycle theory book, we have a picture of the universe there, and I can actually show what that means. Maybe some people don't understand this. I don't know if you can see this, but backwards or not, you can see that little red dot. That's what we call the observed universe. And look what's in the center of it. Yet another part of a huge vortex that we're part of. I don't think we can say that's anything but speculative, but you can see this huge mass outside the current observed universe. And this is where they get the idea, well, maybe there are multiverses. Well, that's not a multiverse. It's just another part of the universe. It's just pretty big, and it affects the gravitation, but it's not a multiverse. And so the universe is, there's a reason we use uni, and that means one.
Right,
Let's keep it
right,
together. Let's
right.
keep it together.
I say that all the time. I say the reason universe actually exists in almost every human language, and its intention by people is to mean everything. It's to mean everything. It's not to mean, it's not to be meant to be a unit-environment or some part of a macrocosm or part of the
Just everything.
micro. It's everything. That's why we have it. But because we have language, we have the privilege to make anything into anything, then we can just say it. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are working on their own theories and ideas, in my opinion, are using language without thinking about the scientific consequences of that.
Yeah.
So
the interesting thing about language is, remember we talked about matter and motion. Every language has a noun and a verb in it, in the sentence. So noun is for the thing, and the verb is for what it did, the motion that that thing did. And that's in every language. It's fundamental. And you can't divorce matter from motion. You're not going to say, well, Dave moved across the room, but and kind of divorce that from you. I could say moved across the room. What was it that moved across? Matterless motion moved across the room. This is not possible.
Right. Okay, let's see here. If I got some more here, I'm looking at, oops, end of slideshow. All right, so why don't we go through and the 10 assumptions of science. We're going to just go through and maybe you can just talk briefly about each one, because it's part of your work, this foundation. That is, again, assumptions are those things that you cannot prove. You just have to accept. So these are the assumptions, and maybe if you can go through each one of them, I'll put them on screen here so you can see them, and go through those and just talk about them one at a time. If we've already talked to them, you can sort of briefly go past that.
Well, again, materialism, we say that the universe consists of matter. And then others say, well, really, it's immaterialism is produced by consciousness or something like that. And then causality is the opposite of acausality. Now, I give a different definition of causality, that essentially causality, in my definition, is that any effect will have an infinite number of causes. What does that mean? Well, infinite. You can't determine every single one of those factors. It'll always be a plus or minus. And that goes into the uncertainty thing. Remember, certainty was one of the assumptions that the quantum mechanics folks use. So they have causes, A, B, C, and then they'll have D or something as probability. And why do they do that? Well, because there's always a plus or minus, no matter what measurement you do in science, always a plus or minus. And that's where the uncertainty assumption comes in. And it says this, it says, we can never know everything about anything, but we can always know more about anything. You see how infinity fits in there? And likewise into the causality assumption. Causality says there's an infinite number of causes for anything. That's where we use the infinite. Now, uncertainty then tells us that we're always going to have a plus or minus in any actual measurement. And there are no constants in nature. Sorry to say this, but the light is not constant. It's really, really quite precise how in most environments, unless you get into water when it's 225 instead of 300 million meters per second. Then there's inseparability. That was no matter without motion, no motion without matter. And again, indeterminists think of the separation of this. So what an example is what is called, disincarnation. The spirit can be separated from the body. So religious people use separability in that way, so that they say, okay, we have this wonderful energy that I'm displaying now. That can be, where did he go when he dies? Where does that energy go? That's the separability. They separate matter from motion, and the body is buried, and then the motion goes off, who knows where. So conservation, of course, it says that matter and the motion of matter can neither be created nor destroyed. And that's the opposite of creation. Creation says, no, you can create something out of nothing. And we disagree with that. That's not scientific. Conservation is scientific. Usually it says conservation is the conservation of energy. Well, I object to that and dump that. And I say conservation is that matter and motion of matter can neither be created nor destroyed. Now, number 6 is complementarity. What that is, it's a little complicated. Most people don't know much about the second law of thermodynamics. But the second law says an isolated system will always have, can only have increasing entropy, disorder, and the opposite is never mentioned because this complementarity is used in an isolated situation. It's a systems theory. There's no environment involved. But non-complementarity says that you have actually things coming toward. See, in complementarity, you're getting a system is coming apart. Like you and I'm coming apart more than others, losing hair and such. And so that's what happens to everything in the universe. It comes together at one point and then it comes apart. And where do those parts go? Well, non-complementarity says, look, it goes somewhere else. And that, in other words, in one case, this is a departure, complementary, and non-complementarity is a coming together. So you have, it's dialectical. In other words, things go away and they go toward. And that's true in an infinite universe. It's not true in a finite universe. The finite universe, they talk about heat death, remember, of the universe. And that's assuming there's no outside, no macrocosm. And so what happens, they say, well, it had a beginning and now it'll have an end. And that's typical of a finite system. Irreversibility, that just simply says that even if you do an experiment in a lab, you turn, pH high or low, and you can do that, and you can change colors and so on. And that's still not reversible because you, in the meantime, and the rest of the universe has been in motion. And so every single action that occurs in the universe is irreversible and has always been forever. Reversibility says, well, now we can actually turn things back, and we might be able to go back in time or something like that, which is all ridiculous to anybody who knows science. It's a science fiction thing. It's very fun to play, but it's not going to happen. So infinity, again, infinite in the micro and the macro, and then finity is obviously one or the other, both, usually both. Most people who are, if they think about it, they will realize that if you're really going to get into finity and you're going to have the Big Bang as your guiding theory, then you also have to have finite particle theory. Finite particle theory says there is a particle that everything in the universe consists of, and that it's finite. There's essentially nothing inside of it. And of course, it wouldn't fit Maxwell's 1862 equation, E equals mc squared. It wouldn't fit that. And so consequently, that would be a violation of even relativity. And relativism and absolutism are interesting in that relativism says that everything in the universe is similar to every other thing in some ways and dissimilar in some other ways. Now, absolutism has the other assumption, says that there may be two things in the universe that are identical. And one example is snowflakes. And I got into it on Wikipedia where I tried to say that there were an infinite number of possible snowflakes. And this other fellow was saying, no, there's 10 to the 125 or some darn thing, which he calculated and said that, no, it was finite and we know what it is. No, it's not true. So relativism is really important in certain cases. And one example is people say, well, if the universe is infinite, there'll be another galaxy where a person just like me exists. Exactly like me. I think you were kind of talking about that a little bit. And that's one misconception. That is based on absolutism, possibility of identities. And that's not possible. And that's so we use relativism. And then the 10th one is interconnection. And that simply says that between any two things is matter capable of transmitting motion between those two things in the universe ad infinitum. And disconnection says, no, there could be empty space between any two things. And I disagree with that. I don't think there's any such thing as empty space. And of course, that's where Einstein came in the door. And he rejected that eventually in 1920 when he said, oh, yeah, there's probably ether, but yada, yada doesn't fit his idea of what ether should be. And so this connection is common. People just think we have matter and then we have no matter, but that's not true. And the way that goes is this. There's a idealization between solid matter and empty space. No, solid matter is one ideal and empty space is another. Neither of these exist. Idealizations are ideas. They don't exist. Everything in between exists. So everything shows some, like if you look at the atom, you'll see that it's 90% empty space, quote, because it's not really, but then it has some matter in it. So, and some people say, well, if you did this disconnection or this interconnection completely, you'd have a block universe, a universe that is solid matter. That's not true, because whenever you do, as Aristotle said, every time you split some piece of matter, you're going to find two things, two idealistic things. You're going to find some empty space and some matter. So if you continue to do that, you don't end up with solid matter, even within something in between every two things. It doesn't happen. What you have is a little bit of matter, more, you split it in two parts, you have matter and empty space, matter and empty space. They're idealizations. They help us understand. For example, you have a doorway and you can walk through that doorway. It has empty space, right? Well, we all know there's nitrogen there, oxygen. That's not true. So space just is weaker parts of the universe that allow the stronger parts to move through. That's all that is.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for going through all those. Those they generate a lot of comments, and we do have people in what I call the green room here. So what I'm going to do is usually I go through some of the. I'll be going through some of the comments. This one, of course, is from somebody, my father, who actually follows you. So I figure I'd put this up here. He says, "My main assumption is that the universe is made of objects that move. To disprove it, find one object that does not move. One might find one at one point in time, but the imbalance of the universe will cause it to move." So this seems to be an understanding of what you are saying about matter in motion and all matter is in motion. Actually, the thing that you adopted from one of the philosophers before you, right?
Yeah, well, Einstein had that. He was always talking that you had to know what your motion was in order to know anything about the universe. Everything was in motion, according to him. And if you study anything that you think is not in motion, you will find that, yep, that's why I use a univironment, because the thing itself might seem to be perfectly motionless, like that. I might be motionless, but not really, because there's all kinds of stuff inside me that's moving and all kinds of stuff outside that's moving. And if you use both, the microcosm and macrocosm, you won't have you'll have a better understand of what we're saying about the whole universe being in motion.
Right. Okay, I have people in the green room. If you are a person I want to come up and talk with or discuss or ask a question to Glenn, you can wave at me there. I know I see Nick Percival's here and Ian's here, James Keene. If any of you people want to come up and talk directly, you can. If you also want to do that, you can do that. All you have to do to talk with us live is to go to live.naturalphilosophy.org. You come into our green room. We have room for 10 people right now. We have 7, so we do have some people and some space available. Let me go through these. I know one of the questions. One of the things that people are talking about is ether. And I know I'm not an etherist myself, but of course you can't have light. There's a couple of things about light in general, right? Ether is one solution, a solution that people have for light. We have another one. It's waves of particles, okay, all traveling, in the same direction. But one of the problems with modern science is it talks about it is the problem with Einstein, where you have light, but you don't have there's no physicality to it. Can you explain a little bit about the ether side of that? I'm going to be looking at some questions while you do that.
Okay, one of the reasons Einstein threw out ether was the Michelson-Morley experiment in 1887. And what they did is they tried to measure the ether that the Earth was traveling through. And we know that the Earth goes 30 kilometers per second around ether, being stationary, which they assumed would actually have then if the effect would be an ether wind, and they were trying to measure that. Of course, that never was true. What they were trying to do, see, what ether is actually entrained like the atmosphere of the Earth. It's entrained around the Earth. And so what they were trying to do was impossible. It was sort of like if you were measuring the jet stream in your basement or in your backyard, you're not going to get much. And there's a jet stream, of course, and that's higher up. And so the ether measurements that they did in Cleveland were essentially very close to zero. They were not zero. If you study it and especially if you study Bryant's work, you'll see that it was a little bit more. It wasn't 30 kilometers, though. The 30 kilometers was never achieved. The highest values were maybe 10 or so kilometers per second on Mount Wilson. And they did get that measurement. And now Einstein debated it because, remember, his whole theory depended on no ether. He believed the Michelson-Morley stuff. And that was his hypothesis, his postulate. And we've got lots of evidence. Sagnac is one example of an experiment that shows that there is ether. And there's many other experiments that prove that. But they're interpreted from the point of view of Einstein and relativity. And so they will use, for example, in Sagnac, they prove that ether, that light was not a classic particle. A classic particle, of course, its motion declines with distance. Like you throw a baseball, it slows down, right? So that's not what happened in Sagnac's experiment. Sagnac's experiment just said it's a medium by which the light motion is transferred, and that's exactly what happened. And the folks in relativity tried to excuse that, and Einstein excused it with 8 ad hocs that were used to essentially talk about his untired light theory. Now, remember, tired light theory was used by some people, including Hubble, to say that, well, the cosmological, the galactic redshift was a result of tired light. They didn't have a mechanism for that, so they got kicked out, and of course in favor of Einstein. And he has this untired light theory, and so these 8 ad hocs. You know, an ad hoc is an add-on to a theory to save it. He's got 8 of them. I list them in the book, Infinite Universe Theory, and is really neat because, you know, remember, it doesn't slow down.
Yeah.
And it is a massless particle. It has nothing in it, and it travels through a massless environment. Macrocosm is massless. And so it's really miraculous. and so anybody who studies these ad hocs kind of giggles about it. And it's one reason to throw out Einstein's his theory of light as a particle. And it's really just a wave. And right now we have in physics a wave-particle duality, because we know it has that light involves collisions. Remember, he even got the Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect, where there were collisions involved. What were those collisions of? They were of existing ether particles. Just like when you hear something, what is it? Particles from the atmosphere hit your eardrum, right? And that's what is sound? Sound is, if Einstein was doing it, he would call sound being produced by sound-ons, particles that travel from, from my mouth to your ear. Those are sound-ons, according to Einstein. But he never brought that up because it's so silly, because it's really just motion in the atmosphere, and that's what it is. And light is the same way. And I know a lot of people still don't believe in ether, but I actually, in my Infinite Universe Theory book, I calculated its mass. It is so tiny, 10 to the minus 47 grams. I calculated also that there are 10 to the 20 ether particles in an electron. Just think about how small that is. No wonder we haven't been able to detect it directly, and I'm not even sure we'll be able to do it directly. It's all by inference, like through the Sagnac experiment and so on.
No. Well, there is. The only thing I will say on this side is that there is another. My father in 2015 came up with a way to make waves, but it's not from one particle. So it's not a particle. That's the problem with photons. Photons, of course, Newton said they'd have to be different sizes to, to move to create frequency. But if you have waves of particles, of course, you can create any types of things. In fact, that's what we do in the digital world. So there is the idea that for instance, Signac proves ether. It proves that there needs to be a physical medium, but there is I believe, a second way you can do that. But I think the most important thing is that we need to understand that you can't have, stuff, for instance, going on forever. This idea that light just goes on and just continues to move forever because there's nothing in the way. That's what we think is happening with the Pioneer spacecraft,
Yeah,
right?
right,
The
right.
Pioneer, it's out in space. There's just nothing there. It will go, and if it doesn't hit anything, it's just going to go or till the end of the universe, hit the edge of the universe, and fall on the turtle's back. I'm just kidding.
Well,
But
that's why one of the ad hocs, of course, is just this, that light travels forever,
right,
and it is untired. And,
right,
everything in the universe gets tired, like you and I, and car runs out of gas, and, baseball doesn't go forever. Why is that? Well, because it runs into something, right? And
right,
so, but he hypothesized essentially perpetual motion with his theory of this particle. Now motion in a medium, that's different, because there is no perpetual motion involved there. But in the case of the particle, that's what it was. And so he was in the patent office. That was interesting. Had he applied for a patent for this process, he himself, when he was younger, would have thrown it out, because
right.
automatically, if you say you've got a perpetual motion machine, gone. They don't even look at it, because they know that that's not possible because of the second law of thermodynamics.
Right, right, right. So I'm going to take a look at a statement here. It's let me get this a little so we can see it a little bit better. I just want to, I know sort of what you would be saying about it. This is the universe really expanding, or is energy simply making more and more complex patterns through which light must pass? And again, I think one of the things about just looking at it, it's a mixing again of terminology where it's not consupponable, right? I mean, this kind of statement.
Yeah, is the universe expanding? Remember, the expansion depends on Einstein's 8 ad hocs. In other words, that light travels through perfectly empty space. Nothing happens to it. There's no redshift. It doesn't lose any energy. But we know that it loses energy. Remember the cosmological
Mhm.
redshift. So it does lose energy. And energy in this way is calculated as a matter in the motion of matter. In a way, this is something new that I haven't really included elsewhere. Maybe it's in infinite universe theory. But I just think that to expect waves to reproduce themselves 100% perfectly, not going to happen. And that's where the energy is lost. So, and the only way it can go is to have longer wavelengths. That's what we're seeing with the cosmological redshift. And so that is so now, as far as energy, I think this fellow is talking about energy simply is energy.
Making more.
Energy can't make anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
energy can't make stuff.
see, the universe is already there. It's infinite, and it's moving around and so on. We're calculating the energy and so on. So, but remember, that's where dark energy was invented. It was invented to have enough motion to produce the Big Bang, you see. And the Big Bang, the universe is not expanding. And that you have to read infinite universe theory to understand that more thoroughly. But that's the position that we get when we find out that light actually does get tired over distance and does lose energy over distance. These are facts. These are not, but why it does that, that's where we get into a debate with the conventional physics.
Yeah, I think one of the things though too, I know you've talked about this, and not a disagreement, but we've had a couple of papers at our conference that talk about, in the beginning, dark matter started from this idea that at the edge of the galaxies, stars were going at the wrong speed. and that the only way that could be calculated is if you calculated using Newton or Kepler. It doesn't work. Well, it turns out that what they were doing was treating the gravitational field of the galaxy as a sphere, and it's not. And not only that, I did a video on a spherical galaxy, and they you know what they say about a spherical galaxy? It doesn't have any dark matter. Well, the reason it doesn't is because all the stars are calculable because the gravitational field around it is in fact uniform. Whereas if we know for a fact, if you try to put something in orbit around a potato-like asteroid, you're not going around a sphere. It's not a spherical gravity, right? I mean, it would be like saying the Earth and the Moon at a distance is the same as one. No, we know very much about that. So a lot of us who have looked at this, there is not only not dark matter. Of course, there's not dark energy because there's no such thing as energy. But I think that was one of the things that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
That I don't know if you had seen those papers where you can describe all of these things with Newtonian mechanics or like neo-mechanics. Let me see. Again, yes, I have Ian. Ian wants to come up and say hello. He's a regular here. He comes
Oh,
in.
Ian.
There he is.
Hello,
Yeah,
Glenn.
very good. All right. I love to see you.
Good to see you as well. And
Yeah.
thank you very much for the stimulating exposition. I have a few comments, which perhaps I'll just roll into one, just for the purposes of time, and you might care to address some of them, Glenn. Actually, I'm rather sympathetic to most of your views. I mean, and David has expressed them as well about the universe being everything, and therefore, it's nonsense to talk about something outside of it. One might even define nature to be everything, and therefore, things like the supernatural and the natural are just really one. The supernatural is something that we talk about that we haven't yet obtained a natural explanation for. And the tired light business that you were talking about just now, I accede to that as well. I agree. I mean, in a system where you have no resistance, Newton's first law will apply. If you had no atmosphere at all, well then, or no friction, you would have an object going on forever. Yeah, but obviously, this is not true. And the paradox, actually, which I think you perhaps hinted at, was that Hubble himself, who was given the arch responsibility for denying this, actually made this point. It was his first explanation for it.
They never believed the universe was expanding.
Yeah, yes, quite so. And they say, in 1929 or something, it was just one thing which was put into his proposition that there was a roughly linear relationship between the redshift and distances. Now, just maybe one or two quick questions before I leave it, Glenn. One is, I think you said towards the beginning of the talk that older galaxies are not necessarily further away. Now, I can understand that if one, as you and I do, for example,
younger one,
check the expansion of the universe and the Big Bang and so on, that element comes into play. But I mean, because of the time elapse in the travel of light, surely we are looking at things further back the further we are away. And my second question, if I may just roll it in, is it's actually a bit of a philosophical question. I do work on the basis that the universe is infinite in extent, so time. But how would you address the question which is frequently put, that if it were infinite in time, how could it ever have evolved to the present time? Because there's an infinite amount of time between the present and going right back.
Well, that's a good question. And you see a lot of recycling. For example, in the galaxy, we have in the so-called empty space that Einstein didn't really know about at that time, a lot of hydrogen, there's helium, and there's tons of other things. Like there's gold, platinum, uranium, all these elements, from supernova explosions and so on. Those had to occur long time ago. It takes a long time and they're ubiquitous throughout the galaxy as far as we can tell. And I'm sure between the intergalactic regions, there'll be stuff too. Now, everything in the universe has a beginning and an end, okay? In everything, every separate portion, XYZ portion, like you and I, we have a beginning, we have an end, and the Earth has a beginning and have an end, and the galaxy likewise. And that's kind of interesting. I used to think there was one microcosm that continually recycled, but I don't think there's any evidence for that. It's true that a lot of the galaxies look very similar. And by the way, when you mentioned about the actual thing is that spiral galaxies are seen out 13 billion light years. Spiral galaxies like ours took 13 billion years to form. So what that means is light from those galaxies that the Hubble telescope sees 13 billion light years away, that light took 13 billion years to get here. So at the bare minimum, the universe would have to be 26 billion 26 billion years old. And of course, it's infinite, so you can go on with this all you want, but that's just a simple thing. Now, when we get the Webb telescope, that's going to go up one of these days, we're going to see even more universe. And then they're going to have to recalculate. It won't be 13.7 or 13.8 billion anymore. They'll have to add more to it because the universe is infinite. We're never going to see, we can't prove directly that the universe is infinite. We can only assume that. And I'm telling you, if you read infinite universe theory, that assumption works wonderfully.
Okay, thank you very much. But there's perhaps just one philosophical explanation which people find it hard to grasp. Why should we be in the present now rather than in any other period of time in the infinite past? I think people, grapple with that philosophical concept.
Well, of course, there are beings living on other planets in the universe. Remember, there's 400 billion stars in the Milky Way alone. And then there's 2 trillion galaxies in the universe that we can see. Wow. And you could be on any one of these galaxies. You would be looking different because it's a different planet, perhaps, and so on. But that just happens to be. We happen to be where we're nothing special. In other words, you might say, "Well, why are we here at this time?" And so on. Well, we aren't special. There are trillions of living beings in the universe. They aren't all on the Earth.
Rather likely, yes, because of the sheer number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Glenn.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. Ian's a really great mind. I enjoy bringing him on. He also saves me once in a while. Well, save me once in a while because people are shy, and he's there's nothing shy about him. But
that's great.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really, really mind blowing to people, it was to me when I first heard it, but I believe it 100%. Is there no two things are the same, right? Not even two electrons, if you're an etherist, no two etherist particles, whatever it is, nothing is the same. And that just, it doesn't jibe well with people. And was that something that you got from another philosopher, or was that something that you came up in your own work?
It was in my own work. I remember I invented the Simon coefficient, the similarity coefficient for doing volcanic ash correlations. What we would do from volcanoes such as the one that was at Mount Mazama, Crater Lake in Oregon, we would look at the volcanic ash and determine, we put the samples in the nuclear reactor. That's my physics background. We use a nuclear reactor to make these samples radioactive, and we would be able to measure all these trace elements. And we could compare them, and what people were using for comparisons weren't quite right. So I invented this equation, which actually essentially said, okay, if something's perfectly identical, it gives you a value of 1.00. And if it's perfectly different, it gives you a value of 0.00. None of the analyses I ever had comparing anything with anything else ever came close to 1.00. And the closest we could get, take 2 samples from the same volcano, we would get 0.95. Mm-hmm. And we would, now some people have improved the methods and they could get closer to 0.98, but you never get to 1.00. And that's because no two things in the universe are identical. And remember, the snowflake thing is probably a really good example of that. And people still,
I think part of it, here's something before I forget it. I think what people do with the snowflake one is this. Let's just look at it this way. They're going to look at it's made from what, oxygen and hydrogen,
water, yeah,
H2O,
H2O,
right?
yeah.
So let's just say they go down to that part of that level of the universe only. Then they're going to say, okay, there's this many atoms that we can fit in this sort of space, and therefore the combinatorics of those are going to be this way. There's some sort of rules that they do it, and they come to the conclusion you could probably come up with some equation that would give you those what you would say would be all the combinatorics of that, right? It'd be a human. But the problem with that is that the atoms themselves, the electrons, the nucleons, whatever you call whatever happens, those little pieces down below, those aren't equal either. And so in reality, if you could calculate all the combinatorics and believe in your mind that those are the number of those things are finite. It's sort of like a Legos, right? You can put Legos together in so many ways. But the problem even with Legos is that the pieces of those are different and are changing all the time.
Right.
So if you look at the snowflake, even though you can come up with the combinatorics of the building blocks at the atomic level, I'm sorry, you lose because every atom is a different size. So you're never going to be able to do it and that's a really good example of the infinite universe theory, right?
Yeah, that's right. And remember, I was mentioning that an electron has 10 to the 20, trillions and trillions of ether particles in one electron. Now you're trying to tell me that, you have a snowflake that's identical. You also have to tell me that the orientation of each of the water molecules has to be identical for two to be the same. And also you have to tell me that there's no water in the surroundings that continually enters the snowflake and goes out. We all know that. You know what happens to a beautiful snowflake? Within minutes, it can just kind of collapse. And so that's what happens. And is there an environment in which a snowflake could exist can that environment, that macrocosm, not have any water in it? I don't think so.
Right.
It's not possible.
Right. Here's oops. Oh, this is good. I wasn't supposed to put this up. I missed it. This is a good, intelligent people like Dan Blake. I just want to put that up for you. The intelligent part.
Really I always appreciate that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
We're on the extreme fringe of what is considered right in physics, and so it's always great to have comments like that.
Yeah, no, I put that up there just to, it's very true. That's why I'm having you on here, because your work is phenomenal. Here's an interesting question. Does Glenn think endless means the same as infinite?
Well, I suppose. I don't know what you mean endless of. That's sort of a thing. So remember, there can't be any end to the universe, because it's sort of like, remember in the old days when they were talking about, the Earth is flat and you'll eventually hit dragons there or something. We're not at that stage where we're finally going to realize the universe is infinite, and when there's nothing at the end of endless. There's nothing at the end of the universe. Yes. The universe just goes on. It's not possible. Just think about it. Be logical. It can't end anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think the part of it is, I always thought if it did, you get to the end, you would fall apart, because if you are the making up of all the microcosms below you, keeping you what you are for the time you are, in the motion that keeps you what you are. Yeah. If you get to a place where these things are no longer there, these things will break down. The same thing would happen inside of you if for some reason there was an edge to it.
That's why univironment is so important, because univironment always says there's a microcosm and a macrocosm. Right. There's always a macrocosm. So you can't go to the end of the universe and find empty space. It's not possible. There's always space. That space is always filled with matter.
Okay, I have anybody else in the green room here, because I do see Nick Percival. Did you want to come on and say hello? Or if not, how about James Keene? You're there as well. If you do want to say something, you'll need to, I don't hear any microphones from James Keene. Did you want to come on and say anything, or you're good? No, I think he looks good. He's cool. And Nick, I don't know. Did you want to come on and see? Wave your hand if you want to say. Okay, I need you to get you off your mute because you're unmuted, but nothing's coming out of your microphone. We're not hearing you because so you're going to have to get your check on your computer there. It says, sorry about that, Nick. Give it a shot. I mean, I'll bring you up. If I bring you up, we're not going to hear you. So let me see. Say something. 1, 2, 3.
Oh,
One,
there you
two,
go.
three.
Oh,
Hey,
there he
Nick,
is.
how
There
are
we
you
got him.
doing? Yeah,
Okay.
Great to have you, Nick.
yeah.
It's very interesting. After I graduated from Harvard with a degree in physics, and for some time after that, my only inputs were mainstream physics.
Right.
That's the only thing I ever heard of. In fact, they taught me special relativity, but didn't even mention the twin paradox. There was no hint that anybody in the entire world had ever questioned relativity. So for a long time, seeing rather obvious problems with special relativity, I just studied this on my own because I just thought, hey, I can understand physics and math. I've always done that, but I don't understand this. So I spent many decades in the dark thinking about it and came up, and I wasn't trying to be philosophical. I came up with much of the same conclusions that you did without even trying
Great.
to
Yeah,
be a philosopher. It
that's
just,
great. We were on the same page there.
yeah. But I do have a few comments about maybe the use of words, because one can say one thing and the listener can hear something else. So I'll start off with a simple example. You were talking about free will, and I agree. I'm in the same camp of you regarding determinism and causality. So I think everyone has free will, but I came to the conclusion that if you stand before something and try to choose good versus evil, your decision must be predetermined. It doesn't hang in the balance. There's no choice that's made at that
You have your
decision.
own idea.
It's predetermined.
Right.
And years later, I found that Bertrand Russell had come to the same conclusion, and he stated it as free will requires predetermination. Because if you choose something that's not predictable from your current state, then that means something is getting in the way of your choosing what's your will to choose. So there is free will, but it's different than what everyone kind of thinks of as free will.
Yeah, a lot of people have done that, and they have different definitions for free will and so on. And there's what they call compatibilists or whatever, and they have mine is very simple. I'm just an old farm kid, and everything has a cause, and that would involve everything in my brain. So that's pretty simple. You can never prove this, of course, and the debates go on forever. I remember I was in college, and we used to have dorm debates about, and the scientists would be anti-free will, and then the social guys, sociology guys were into free will stuff, except for the psychologists. The psychologists, it's interesting, they're very much into determinism. They're not into free will. So I just find it's sort of an interminable debate, and I don't find it useful to talk about.
Right. The word, I would just bring up that the word can mean different things.
Oh yeah, right. Some people think it's an illusion. I don't know what an illusion is. That's magic for me, and so I just use straight old determinism, causes, effects, and sorry, that's just the way I am.
Now, we talked about space-time, and this is an area that I've studied for 50 years, so I wanted to make a comment. I think where Einstein went wrong was in his second principle, namely that the speed of light is the same in all inertial frames. And as a result of that necessitated coming up with this concept of space-time, which is
Yeah.
a
And
step backwards.
dilation and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. And okay. At first, when I saw your third assumption, I'm forgetting what was the name of the third assumption.
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty. Yeah, I thought, oh, gee, this is contradictory to 1 and 2, but I think a different phrase would be helpful. I think what you really were talking about was uncertainty of measurability.
Yeah.
I don't think you were endorsing a probabilistic
Oh, no.
universe.
No, just how you calculate probability. You need to use probability for the stuff you don't know.
Yeah, I would change it. I would expand on it and say uncertainty of measurement, because I think
there's nothing certain in any case.
Well, is it probabilistic?
What is probabilistic? Is a measurement. That's all that is. See, you're measuring
within the context of quantum mechanics, but
of anything. All of it has plus or minus. I give that all the time when I do a measurement.
Yeah, but determinism says that what's going to happen is certain.
Okay, you're talking about what is it, Laplace's demon? But that's based on finite causality. Finite universal causality is what is used in classical mechanics, and this is neo-mechanics. We don't do that. We don't use that. We don't claim to be able to detect or predict anything within 100% accuracy. And of course, the classical mechanists are criticized for claiming that, and we don't claim that. We claim there's always a plus or minus. So,
right. But determinism, to me, says, okay, the outcome is certain.
Oh, yeah.
But we can never predict it or measure it because we don't have enough information because there's too many variables.
Right.
Well, that's why I would say uncertainty of measurement. But that's just my thought.
A different. Remember deter? What that means? Well, deter is part of determinism, right? So if something's deterred, it's going to collide with something else, and so that means that's another little bit about what the meaning of determinism is to me.
Okay. Regarding, you put down relativism versus absolutism, and I think a lot of listeners will say you're endorsing Einstein's relativity.
No.
So I think another phrase would be helpful because, from GPS, the data says that there is absolute motion and rest locally with respect to certain physics phenomenon that can be defined. How do they say that? Oh dear. Defined in absolute physics terms. So I think you get away from endorsing relativity. You might say nothing is identical. I agree with that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's how I explain it actually in 10 Assumptions.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, Nick, what's happening is we can redefine and use that word correctly, right? I mean, it's totally divorced from Einstein's relativity, and so But I'm going to step in here, but I do want to say for everyone that if you haven't checked it out, you can check out Nick. He's got his, let me put it here. You have his channel, which you have over 200 subscribers now, Nick. You need to make some more. I mean, you put that out there, but if you haven't watched and talked with Nick, in fact, I may have him on as a person. We should think about doing that, Nick, and talk about your work. But if you want, he has a great lecture series on relativity, special relativity, at nickatime.guru. His channel, he's got over 200 subscribers. He hadn't put up something, I think just a couple of years ago, he put quite a few things up there. So you want to check that out. So thank you very much, Nick. It was great to have you on here.
I'd like to make one controversial remark, and that is, I don't think anything that I've heard from Glenn requires infinity. it requires large beyond human ability to count, but not necessarily in infinity per se. So that's just something to think about.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Thank you so
How you
much.
do it. That's how you
That's
do
right.
it.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick. I really appreciate it. We've already gone over, but I'm letting it go because things have been going quite well. But I think what we'll do now is we're going to wrap this up. And what I want to remind everybody is that you're going to be back in a couple of weeks, right? To talk about specifically the Big Bang. Now, it turns out that a lot of the, how do you say, fighting that goes on with critical thinkers and mainstream science has been around the Big Bang, and it's been going on for quite a while. And what we want to do is, I don't want to say a whole lot, but you came across and talk about the Big Bang quite a bit. What was one of the reasons you sort of use that? Obviously, there's relativity, but the Big Bang. How did you just give us a brief summary before we come on next time, 2 weeks from now? I think it's 2 weeks from now, and talk about the Big Bang. How did you get involved in the Big Bang? Why did you see that as an important thing in your philosophical work? Just give us a short version here, because we're going to be going.
Very short. I think I was a Big Banger in '78, and
Really?
yeah, I was a Big Banger because I believed, science, that's supposedly science. I hadn't studied it, right?
Right,
And
right.
like a lot of us, so you didn't look into it. And why would a little farm kid like me ever know anything about that? And so then this is what I tried to do. I remember they said the universe is expanding. And then I said, okay, well, if that's true, some of the parts of the universe are giving off light, and maybe that light crashes somewhere between the two things, and bingo, we have a continuing universe. So I was always trying to figure it out. And then finally I just said, this is nuts. How can anything, it's anti-creationism. How can anything explode out of nothing? So
Yeah. So
one of the things I'm going to talk about is that when you make something, you bring things together.
right.
The Big Bang is bringing things apart. That's another silly thing that I couldn't do.
Right, right. Well, listen, folks, first of all, I want to thank you, Glenn, for coming on. There's a whole new audience out there, and I felt very necessary to have you out. It's also good to see people like, Nick and Ian and other people who have been around a little bit, my father as well. You do have a history within the dissident community, which is quite strong. You've changed. I know you were out there when I first met you in the early 2000s at the NPA conferences, really out there evangelizing in some sense the idea of, first of all, philosophy and the use of our words and the use what those things mean in the philosophical meaning. And so, I mean, in my opinion, you've, like I said, you don't need to do anything else in your life, because you've given us quite a great body of work and put a lot of things together. I think the other thing too that impresses me so much is your basis in philosophy as well. Today and age, you don't have to have a degree in it, because to me, I don't care. In my movie, I say it. It took me 8 years in my movie to come up with this phrase. Don't tell. I don't know what. I don't know. I don't. Let's see. It's not who you are, it's what you say. And so, and that's really what it comes down to. To me, I don't care if you're a janitor working somewhere and you say amazing things, or whether you have a PhD from MIT. I think it's most important to what you've given the world. You spent a lot of time for a farm boy on this stuff, and we really, I want to thank you very much. And it's a good thing you're around. And I do want to put one thing in your head. I would like you to think about seriously, because we are starting to put together. We have real online software that the CMPS is licensing. It's not a whole lot. It's a couple $100 a year, but that allows you to teach. Now, I know it's not so easy for you to go to your local college and teach even what you're teaching because it will fly in the face of a lot of things that people are supposedly are the truths. But I'd love to have you think about it seriously to put together a course. It's very easy to do online. It's called LearnDash. LearnDash is made to make courses. They're quite easy. You can make videos, and you can has quizzes. You can have tests. You can have all those
Sounds
kinds of things.
good. Yeah, send me the link. I'd like to
Yes,
see
I
that.
will.
Yeah,
And
be
so,
good.
so I just think that's what you need to do to the world because it's one thing to read it in a book. It's another thing to have you teach. And today and age, I don't know if you know, but universities, all of the best ones in the world are doing it online. And
Sure.
some of them are doing better online than they are doing in person. The world's going that way. So
Yeah.
I'd really like you to consider, but thank you so much for taking your
Yeah.
time. It was very early and we look forward to talking on the Big Bang. If you want to prepare something, you can. If not, let me know. We'll have a million questions. And I want to thank everybody who's tuned in again. So I'm going to leave you and put on wrap this up. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
And thank you. It's really great. And I'm really happy to talk to people who actually understand some of this stuff, like you.
Yeah, it is
And
frustrating. at times.
and Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people who admire you quite a bit. And I do see some people who are new to, don't really know about all of us in the MPA and CMPS who are very new to critical thinking. And the comments in the comment areas have been quite good. He says, I'm new here, but this is great. So you're getting a whole new generation. And so you heard it here, folks. It's recorded for prosperity that he says he's going to look into doing a course. And I think that would be really, really good. So thank you so much once again.
Okay. And so everybody should read Infinite Universe Theory so they can get head start on our next little
yes.
meeting.
I will put that up there. Right here. I'll put it here.
If you put in Infinite Universe Theory, you'll find it on Amazon.
Right
There you
there.
go. Yeah.
Yep. And you can put it in there, and you can actually get it for $6, I think, too, as an ebook.
Yeah, about I think $9.99. They always want, and then you can get a color paperback and a black and white paperback. And
Right.
You choose what you like.
Yeah, and I think this is really good because this book, and the reason we didn't talk about it justifiably is because this is so linked to there's a lot about the Big Bang, and so we'll be talking about it. So I urge everybody, you have 2 weeks before we're going to have him back. So if you read it, you're going to be a lot more informed, of course. You can have good questions for him. Again, you can also talk with us. But again, thank you so much, Glenn, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
All right. Okay, folks, that wraps it up for today. I want to thank everybody again, all my subscribers on Dissident Science on YouTube. I want to thank all the members of the CMPS for their support, all the people who were here during the 12 years we've been doing this Saturday morning broadcast. And I want to thank Franklin Hugh again for all the many years he has been working on this. I've been here in the past. And again, if you want to support us and help us out, you can go to our websites, naturalphilosophy.org. You can sign up, become a member, and you can actually help pay as little as $35 a year to keep this going, because it's us that gets support. We don't have any university or corporate sponsors. If you want to read more about people who are in the dissident world, you can, in more of a easy reading, sort of a magazine, you can go to sciencewoke.org. And of course, our 2 YouTube channels at youtube.philosophy.org. There's a lot of great videos like this on that channel. And also, I have a lot of YouTube, almost 250 YouTube videos as well on dissident science. And I'm going to take you out with our stinger here from that. It works for next week too. And want to thank again Glenn Borchardt for his participation. You'll see him in 2 weeks. So I'm going to play a few things here, a little bit of advertising for our organization and what's coming up. and a little bit about our organization, the CNPS. All right, folks, remember, I'm David D. Hilstra. I'm your science therapist trying to get you to the promised land of becoming a critical thinker. Stay thinking, stay critical. Ciao for now.